1, 2, test, test, test. Okay, we are recording now. On today's Transport Evolved, Tesla patents tracking your EV's energy use, and Hell's Angels freeze over. Quite literally. These stories and more coming up next on Transport Evolved. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the delayed episode 204 of Transport Evolved, this time recorded on the 20th of June 2014. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield. We've only got one guest today. We've had masses of problems here at Transport Evolved Towers, but I'm sure it's getting better. As you can see, it's quite hot here today. It was very hot last week, and we had trouble with one of our audio sound cards, which is now propped up. And I think we've solved the problem. So hopefully we'll actually get through a check today, an entire show, without having any sound problems. But someone who has stepped into the breach at literally the sort of 59th minute is Matt Stevens, all the way from Canada. He is the man behind Cross Chasm. And you might recognise the company in a slightly different name. My EV, or Fleet Karma. Matt, welcome to the show. Welcome first of all, and tell us about your company and what you do.
Okay, well, hi everyone, I'm Matt, and it really is a pleasure to be here. So the company name is Crosschasm, but as Nikki said, a lot of people know us as either Fleet Karma or My Karma. And basically we try and help fleets and individuals figure out what high efficiency vehicles they may or may not want. And a lot of the times it's electric vehicles, and with My EV, we're trying to take some of our Fleet Karma technology and bring it to every EV owner in the world.
Now, the technology that you're using, because I first became aware of you guys way back, it was a couple of years ago, when you started doing some kind of fleet management for EV owners in the frigid north of Canada, and we do mean the frigid north. But we'll come to that in a minute, because your company goes back a lot further. You've got a long-standing connection with electric vehicles. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's very true. So the founding team, we actually worked together since 2004. We were part of a U.S. Department of Energy competition to design hybrid and electric vehicles. So we worked actually on a hybrid fuel cell Equinox. That was the first project we worked on, and we liked it so much that we wanted to start a company. So we were starving grad students, and we wanted to be starving startup folks. So in 2007, we incorporated the company, and since then, we've been working on all different types of hybrid and electric vehicles, from on-road automotive vehicles to delivery vehicles to lunar rovers to stealth snowmobiles. So
just go back a bit there. Lunar rovers.
Yes. So the challenge with having no atmosphere is that you can't run a gasoline engine, so everything has to be electric. So there's a lot of interest in further development of both lunar and Mars rovers. So we've been pulled into a number of projects, including this one, to design electric rovers that would be suitable for future moon missions.
That is awesome. I'm so glad that I've got someone on the show who can talk to me about this, because I've just finished reading The Martian by Andy Weir. Excellent book. I don't know if you've read it.
I've heard about it. I definitely want to read it, but I haven't read it yet.
Because one of the things that kind of, without giving too much away, electric vehicles save the day in this book. Essentially, the guy has been stranded on Mars. Mark Watney is his name. He's an astronaut. He's part of the first manned mission to Mars, and something goes wrong. He's left behind because everyone thinks he's died, and he's left to sort of fend for himself, I think, for 4 years on Mars. And one of the ways he gets around, obviously, he's got a Mars rover that he has to hack. Let's put it like that. And let's just say that he gets range anxiety even in space.
It sort of sounds like Castaway for nerds.
Yeah, absolutely. Robinson Crusoe meets Castaway. It's in space. And Andy Weir, it was his first book. Done a fantastic job. Lots of science and seemingly well researched, by what I can tell from my sort of A-level physics background. But tell me, when building stuff when doing sort of extra planetary vehicles, for that are run on electricity, what special considerations do you have to worry about? Because there's a lot of dust up on the moon.
There's a lot of dust. The other thing is like you can't have wheels because you can't have pneumatic wheels or rubber materials because they just won't work in those temperatures. So basically everything is metal. So the projects we work on, so when they're prepping for any military or lunar mission, there's a bunch of technology readiness levels, and as you rise in what they call TRLs, you get more space ready. So our designs have implications for how they would operate on the moon, but then they actually get sent to Hawaii, to the tops of some mountains there, and or some basically volcanic surfaces, and then they get tested there. So there's definitely issues around temperature. There's issues around standard materials that you would just naturally use that you just can't use. So it's really interesting. But at the end of the day, it's an electric vehicle, and the design that you put into a lunar rover is not that different than what you put into a Model S.
Wow, that is so cool. All right, well, let's move on to the reason you're on the show today, other than your expertise in electric vehicles, is that you all at Cross Chasm are doing a bit of a Kickstarter project at the moment. It's not a Kickstarter, it's an Indiegogo. Same kind of idea. This is a bit like Google, isn't it? We say we Google something even if you use Bing. Same kind of thing. You kickstart something even if it's on Indiegogo. I've made that decision. And this is based on some work that you've done previously for both petrol or gasoline fleets and electric fleets in Canada in cold weather. You did this essentially a fleet monitoring system, didn't you? And what you're now promoting on Indiegogo is a personal version of that. How am I doing?
Perfect.
Okay,
you hit the nail on the head.
So tell us about the project, and as a bit of a disclaimer, I've ordered 2. So I'm a backer times 2 because I want one for my Leaf and one for my Volt. But give us kind of the 50,000 foot view.
Okay, perfect. Well, and thank you for being a backer. We really appreciate it. So when we went from designing powertrains, which we still do, what started happening is fleets would reach out to us and say, okay, well, I bought this electric vehicle. It's not working the way I thought it would. I'm getting less range in cold weather. Can you come and see if there's something wrong with the vehicle? And what we quickly learned was really important, especially for plug-in vehicles, that you understand what range you'll get based on how you're driving. So then we built a system to help people know that. So we clip into their conventional vehicle, they drive for 1 to 3 weeks, and then with that we can say, is an EV a good decision or not, based on your driving cycle. And so since we were doing that, fleet said, well, that's great. Then they bought EVs, and then they said, oh, well, we need something to log EVs.
Yeah.
So that's when we looked out there and said, well, what's out there? And the problem is that access to the necessary signals isn't readily available. So we built a system that does that. And then because we were doing that, a number of individuals said, this is great. I'd really like it for my personal EV. And our background is more on the fleet business space, but we said, hey, let's kickstart it. Let's run an Indiegogo campaign, because we had a number of people reach out and said, hey, if we can get enough people, let's do this. Let's commit to it, and let's take the fleet technology and adapt it to something that is more useful for the individual and is more at the right price point. So at a 10,000 foot, it's basically it's a logger you clip into the diagnostics port of your EV. Except for it's not reading diagnostic signals, it's reading electric vehicle signals. And it sends that data over Bluetooth link to your smartphone.
Yep.
And then that data comes back to our server, so we can do a bunch of data crunching for you and hold your historical profiles, and then gives you a bunch of information about your EV. And I know one of the things you're really excited about is charge point requests.
Yeah, so that's actually the thing which pushed it over for me, because already have open vehicle monitoring system. I already have the Leaf Spy Pro that I run in my Leaf. But this is a new system where you've got a QR code that you can have on your windshield of your car. Excuse me.
Yeah, exactly.
If you leave your car at a charging station and somebody comes along who really, really needs to unplug you for a charge, their wife's having a baby, they're late for a meeting, they're going to miss their plane or whatever, they can send you an anonymous message going, dude, can you help me out? And you can say, yeah, it's safe to unplug me. Now, in certain parts of America, that's not going to fly because obviously California, for example, has got that that law banning you from doing it. But in other places, that's going to be a really useful feature. So how did you all decide on that?
It was just my personal experience. So I'm a proud Volt owner with over 100,000 kilometers on my vehicle. And I usually feel really bad plugging into public charging stations. But my range to and from work, I use almost all my EV range. So when I am out running errands, I really like to be able to plug into charging stations, but I don't want to take the plug from a Leaf owner.
Right.
So this was just a way that I can plug in and I can leave the QR code. So I don't have to leave my personal information, but I leave an easy way for someone in a Leaf to say, hey, I really need the plug. Can I grab it? And I can say, go nuts.
I have to say that is such a Canadian thing to do. You're fitting right into the Canadian stereotype there of just being a generally nice guy, Yeah, sure, but plug in. I'd be interested to know. We're coming up to one of those stories later on in the show today. But how many miles or how many kilometers do you get on average in electric mode in that Volt of yours?
So I'm more familiar with kilometers, but I'll try and do the conversion. So in the depth of winter, because I put on winter tires, given where we are, so I lose a lot as soon as I put on my winter tires. But I get about 29 kilometers in the depth of winter, and I go up to these days I'm getting about 68 kilometers, which is sort of my top end.
Oh, wow.
So in miles, we're talking sort of 18 miles on the very low end in the depth of winter.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I get about 42, 43 miles in spring and fall.
That is awesome. I'm not going to crow here, but I managed 70, I think I did 79 kilometers today. So it was just under 50 miles. So I was quite happy about that. And that was on the freeway as well. All right. Well, we'll obviously people can, there's links in the show notes to your Indiegogo campaign. Tell people what they can get and what the different levels of backing are, and then we'll plow in with some of our stories.
Yeah, sure. So for 5 levels, you get a high five, and we actually get you involved in deciding what features will and won't be in the final app. And then for I think it's $29, you get a T-shirt. There's 3 different designs that are promoting EVs. I think one says "I miss gas stations," said no EV owner ever. And then for 119, you get the EV log. You get the device for the plug in your vehicle and the app. 129 for Model S owners. But promise, we're not trying to curve you because you have a nicer vehicle. It's simply that the Model S requires a special harness.
Tesla's special.
Yep. Yeah. So for at the early bird, it's 119, but I think we're almost sold out of the 119, and then it goes up a bit after that. But yeah, so for if you're quick, you can get the full system for $119.
Cool. All right, well, let's go on talking about Tesla. As I said at the beginning of the show, we had a technical problem last week, which meant that there was no show last week. I had lots of people asking why. But last week, Tesla did what it had been threatening to do for some time. It opened up its patents and said, hey, guys, we are going to basically make all of our patents open source from now on. Importantly, Tesla's not going to stop applying for patents. And Elon Musk, Tesla CEO, basically justified that by saying, we don't want other companies coming along, taking ideas that either we've come up with or that other people have come up with and being patent trolls, sitting on the technology and then trying to sue someone for large sums of money if they try and do something similar. So Tesla's going to carry on applying for patents as it has done to this point. It's then just going to make those patents available on a effectively on an honor system, fair use policy, and that's been described by Elon Musk last week as being if Tesla's patents are used by a rival company in their vehicles, and they happen to use multiple Tesla patents, but then Tesla needs something that they have a patent to of a similar value, Tesla's going to get very upset if they suddenly then get sued. So they're looking for, essentially, Tesla's looking for a kind of quid pro quo basis behind this all. But at the same point, Tesla's not essentially looking for rights to go and use other people's patents. Essentially, Musk has said, we're doing this because we want to see electric vehicles take off. Tesla's a really small company. It has less than 1% market share. And the only way that we can see electric cars taking off is if we pave the way. We clear the path through the jungle. That was the analogy that he used. What do you make of this all, Matt?
So I really like the concept. I'd like to understand a little bit more about exactly what you were digging into is, what really is the freedom to use. So strong kudos to Tesla for making this statement. And I believe, with all the work we do with the OEMs, with their high efficiency vehicles, including plug-in hybrids, they really do see more of the competitor as the non-high efficiency, the low efficiency vehicles. So
right.
I think I've seen that sort of vein go across the board. Now, having said that, there's large legal departments and business strategy departments that are managing the IP portfolio at some of the other companies. So I'm sure a lot of people, even us included, are trying to understand, okay, well, what does that mean as far as access? So it's a little bit gray right now. Mm-hmm. So I can tell you from our standpoint, like we wouldn't want to tread in those waters until we better understood, what is that quid pro quo? Because we're supportive of it. We really do want to see plug-in industry move forward. Yeah. But right now there's a lot of risk because it's really unclear.
Well, Tesla said, the actual words Musk used were in good faith. Now, mm-hmm. the idea behind that, essentially, as he said, is if someone's using our patents and then we need to use something of theirs, we don't want to be sued back, and we'd expect mm-hmm. them to give us a bit of leeway. Mm-hmm. Similarly, Tesla's going to get very upset if someone comes along and basically clones a Model S and then tries mm-hmm. to sell it as a Tesla. Musk said, you will be, that won't work. And as long as, I think, in good faith, as Musk characterized in the press conference after the announcement, was, look, we are wanting everybody to benefit from the technology that we've developed. And as long as nobody's doing anything stupid with it or trying to pretend to be us, we're not going to have a problem. Mm-hmm. And there were a few caveats. We actually wrote an article this week over at Transport Evolved about some of the things we learnt from the Tesla patent announcement. There's a great deal of frustration from Musk, and it's very obvious. He's frustrated with the automotive industry. He's frustrated at the glacial movement of the auto industry. And actually, we wrote another article this week saying, look, this patent giveaway is going to take a very long time to have any kind of effect on the automotive industry, because unlike Tesla, which moves in a software speed, Silicon Valley speed, where life cycles of products are much, much shorter, the automotive industry thinks in sort of 6, 7, 8 years, sometimes even in decades, when it's talking about life cycle for vehicles. Standard automotive production cycle is 6 to 8 years, with a mid-cycle refresh after 3 or 4 years, and those mid-cycle updates tend to be little things like maybe a new stereo or different color seats. This is a big change that Musk has to ask the automotive industry to make in order to benefit. And Musk said in the press conference, look, he thought that patents were essentially for companies who couldn't innovate, who weren't innovating fast. And the sign of a good business was to keep ahead of the competition by continually innovating and fostering that innovative spirit. Now, that's a lovely soundbite. I'd be interested to see how that will work in the real world, and I don't think it's going to happen immediately. And you said yourself, we'd like to have a look at those, but we're treading lightly, and I suspect other companies are as well. The other thing that I want to add is that these patents, it's not as if Tesla's now printing a book that you can, go to the Tesla website and order the Tesla patent book, and you get it's not going to be like an Airfix aeroplane. It's not going to give you detailed instructions on how to build a Tesla supercharger or how to make your own Model S. This is the whole idea behind patents, is that these are very technical documents that lay out either a very specific or sometimes a general idea of how something should work. that have been patented, protected for the company's benefit. And you have to be an engineer. You have to be someone who understands engineering, whichever sphere of engineering that you're looking at for the patents, to really get the best out of it. And it's, even if you're an engineer, you're probably still going to sit there with the essentially the white paper and go, okay, so what does this mean? How does this work? It's not a blueprint, right?
Yeah. So one of the requirements for a patent is that you do what our lawyers call reduced to practice. So it does have to be descriptive enough that someone that's an expert in the area could actually make what's being described based on what's described in the patent. But that's in theory the requirement. But having read patents myself, there's a lot of times where there's a lot of stitching that needs to happen to understand exactly how something's being done.
Right, and it's also a case of the person who wrote the patent and his company or her company will understand implicitly what's being talked about, but someone who's never experienced this concept before would go, oh, okay, how does that work then? So it's very interesting. But there already has been movements this week because as the Financial Times reported this week, BMW and Nissan have gone and spoken to Tesla about working together on a charging network. Now, Elon Musk himself admitted that BMW was at Tesla HQ the day before the patent announcement. He was very, very careful to say that was a coincidence. We didn't turn up and do this because we wanted to talk to BMW before we announced it. It just happened to coincide that BMW was coming along to talk about charging. Now, Nissan and BMW, obviously big names in the EV world these days. And the rumours are they all want to work together with Tesla. In the past, Tesla has said it will work with anybody on EV charging, but the kind of the nugget, the deal breaker or deal maker is that the companies have to agree that they will have the same ethos as Tesla when it comes to charging, and that means you don't actually charge owners at the point of electricity for charging the vehicle. The costs kind of rolled in or subsidized by the automaker in some way. You're not charging customers directly. And also that it has to be 130 kilowatts. So this is going to be really interesting. Obviously, the BMW i3's just gone on sale in North America, and it uses the CCS charge standard, which is a whole new charge standard. It's not very well supported yet. Obviously, Nissan with the CHAdeMO is much, much more supported, but is limited by the fact that it's only 50 kilowatts. And we know that Nissan is looking into a 150 mile hypothetical Leaf. And I think these two bode very well together, don't you, Matt?
Yeah, I definitely do, and I think this is the whole practice that of what Musk is doing is he's trying to play nice in the sandbox, and he's saying, look, the more we play nice in the sandbox with each other, the faster we can move the industry as a whole, and it's to everyone's benefit. And I believe wholeheartedly in that, and I'm really glad they're doing it. And I think especially around the charging infrastructure. For me, the 130 kilowatt, just because we work a lot with utilities and smart charging projects. Hearing that number gives utilities heart palpitations, and there's good reasons why. So I definitely like the idea of harmonizing standards. I would say mandating that public charging networks need to be to such a high power level has really big cost implications. And in some ways, I think that could actually work to our industry's detriment.
Yeah. And that's a very interesting point, because the other kind of string to this is that Tesla is essentially the only company right now who has been working, at least publicly, on this kind of semi-storage project where you have a charging station with off-grid storage capability. And that would work very well in low population areas where you might get 2 or 3 Model S's pulling up a day, or 2 or 3 electric cars pulling up a day. If you've got a charging station that is continuously pulling, say, 20 kilowatts from the grid and charging up the batteries in between each car, and then the batteries are used to essentially dump charge that power into a vehicle, that would work. Or, tying that in with solar panels. And those are things which we know Tesla's worked on in the past. And Tesla's business model is very different because it offers to essentially help support the grid. And again, that's the other genius. It's the catching flies with honey rather than vinegar, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's just a matter of understanding how that could work at scale. And for me, the high power level charging, I think part of why I sort of immediately get a bit concerned is my background in battery degradation.
Yeah.
And especially taking a cold battery, and that's obviously something that I care a lot about where I live, is taking a battery that's, in minus 20 degrees Celsius, even if it's warmed a little bit or conditioned, and trying to, flow 100 kilowatts into it on the charge cycle. You're going to hit the voltage levels very quickly, and it's also a very effective way to age that battery.
Yes.
So I like it, and exactly like if you're going to go to 130 kilowatts per station, you have to make sure that you have local fixed storage to try and mitigate the impact of the grid. But again, there's cost implications of that. So I love what Musk is doing. It's definitely going to help with the infrastructure. As you said, I think you hit the nail on the head that it's going to take time for this actually to evolve. There's just a few sort of mandates that are in the ethos that I realize that is solely because Tesla believes it's for the long-term benefit of the industry. I'm just a little bit more concerned that it may delay some things more than help.
I'm just going to throw this part in. I mean, this is not in the show notes, but I'm just having such fun. I'm just going to throw this in. Earlier on this week, I think it was CNBC asked Elon Musk, and I cannot believe anybody actually asked him this. Musk obviously was also the CEO of SpaceX, essentially what we'd like to think of as the first proper commercial space agency, sending payloads into space, saving NASA astronomical figures, right, in terms of the cost to send stuff into space versus
no pun intended.
Yeah, absolutely. And Musk was asked, what's harder, making an affordable electric car battery or sending someone to Mars? Now, the background behind this is Musk has said, look, in 10 years' time, we want to send a manned mission to Mars. We think we can do this. And we'll not only just send someone there, we'll actually have a permanent base there in 10 years. That's my goal. Musk turned around. Now, anyone who's worked in the space industry or even had a passing interest in the space industry knows that it's much easier and much cheaper to build an affordable electric car battery pack on Earth than developing a whole new vehicle system, because that's what you'll need to send people and cargo the many, many, many months that it takes to get to Mars. But it did put things in perspective. You know, what Elon Musk is trying to do with Tesla, what Tesla's trying to do with the electric car industry is peanuts compared to what some of our goals as a world are to explore space. And it also begs the question, or raises the question. I get told off for saying begs the question. It raises the question. Why have we not invested in this all a long time ago? You know, we've spent $192 billion on the shuttle program between 1971 and 2010 when it was retired. And we're talking about the gigafactory costing $5 to $6 billion just to get to operational stage. That's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's just it's just crazy. Right, we're going to have a quick ad break. We'll be right back. If you're watching the stream live, there won't be an ad break. If you're listening, there won't be an ad break. There'll be one in the recorded version if you're watching on YouTube. We'll be right back. We're back. I said it wasn't going to take very long. Part 2, we've got the wonderful Matt Stevens from Cross Chasm here. He's having lots of fun. We're getting very geeky about space and electric vehicles. All sorts of fun. Tesla announced this week, or rather sent out a letter, an email to its Model X owners going, we haven't forgotten about you guys. Don't worry. But there are some updates that we think you'd like. One of them being all Model X's will now be supercharger ready, which I think is awesome. And the second thing is all Model X's will now be all-wheel drive. So when the Model X was first unveiled, Tesla said, we'll offer a rear-wheel drive version, just a rear-wheel drive, or we'll do an all-wheel drive version. But now Tesla's gone, you know what, we're actually going to put 2 motors in, offer all-wheel drive. That's going to go down well in the frigid north, isn't it, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. My wife and I have already talked about it.
Yeah. The Tesla Model X is kind of on a list of cars that I would consider buying one day, I think. One day.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's quite in our budget realm.
One day.
But the Outlander plug-in is.
We can dream. We can dream. Oh, I've got one of those next week. I should be looking for. I'll tell you all about it. But it's very interesting to see. Also, the third row of seats is now an option. So if you don't need 7 seats, you can just have 5, which I think is very, very important for people who want to have, who don't want those extra seats. And it's a bit like those old days when we had the Volvo wagons that came with either 5 seats or 7 seats. If I had to say, I mean, if anyone asks me about seats, I always advise they get more seats than they need. So if somebody asks me about, should I buy a Tesla with 5 seats or should I get the Model S with the 2 kid seats in the back? Even if they don't have kids, I usually say, get those extra seats, because you don't know when you sell the car if somebody else is going to pay you extra for those extra seats. So always order them. If you can afford them, always order them. But I suppose that will keep some people happy. Moving on, ChargePoint, the US-based charging company, logged its 5 millionth charging session last month. The announcement was made this week. It was founded in 2008, and it took quite a long while for it to amass its first million charging sessions. Its 4 millionth was earlier this year, so it's actually only taken it 3 months to get from 4 to 5 million. And they did this fantastic infographic plotting the number of EVs sold versus the number of public charging stations. The number of public charging sessions, and it almost is exact. The way it follows. It's brilliant. The way that the two track each other. And my question is, how long before we get to 6? What do you reckon, Matt?
All I would say is a lot less than it took to get from 4 to 5,
right?
Which is good news for us.
So I think it's going to be less than a month, isn't it? It's got to be.
Yeah, I think if I had to guess, I'd say 5 weeks, but that's my over-under.
It also kind of blows away the concept, because I've heard lots of people talking about, early adopters, we're a bit crazy, we'll drive anywhere and do anything. We're the people who'll try and drive across Europe and fail, but we'll try and drive across Europe, or we'll try and do this, or we'll try and do that. And we'll drive down to the Turtle every time because we know we can get there, But the kind of the general wisdom has always been that early adopters are very different to mainstream buyers who are now buying the cars. And the mainstream buyers are the ones who go, "Ooh, I don't know if I'll charge away from home." They know what they know. They know they can plug in at home. They know they've got a limited range, but they don't care. They just plug in when they need to at home. But they're actually going out and plugging in public. And that's a very different bit of information. It means that people are feeling more confident, doesn't it, in the electric car?
Well, what I would love to know is those increased sessions, are they people that are mapping out their day and doing things they wouldn't have already done because the public infrastructure is there? Or are they people that are naturally already going to do those things? They have enough range to make it back home, and the ability to top up charge wherever they are is just a nice add-on. So that's where I'd love to be able to understand those. I don't know a good way to actually track that. But I think where we would all really benefit is where it's not just used to top up, but you naturally have enough range to get home. It's where you're really expanding the use of these vehicles. That's where I'd love to be able to dig into that.
And I think also there are 2 different ways of using it. There's the charge when you absolutely need to, and then there's the charge. Oh, there's a charging station. I'll just plug in there. I know
exactly.
I know that when I'm out and about, if I see a rapid charge station, I'm there. I'm plugged in. Even if it's just for 5 minutes, I'm plugged in and I'm charging. And it's also about getting that buff. Last week, as a case in point, we'd probably driven only about 50 miles in the Leaf. And I decided, okay, I've got enough to make the round trip, 30-mile round trip or 20-mile round trip to come back home. And I knew I had plenty of miles, but I stopped because I had 10 minutes of spare time. I looked at the clock and I went, if I just carry on driving, I'm going to be 10 minutes early. Let's plug in and charge for 10 minutes and then I'll arrive on time. And I did. And it just gave me that buffer, and it's quite a nice feeling. I know that Volt drivers also plug in more than Leaf drivers because they want to use electric only despite having a gasoline engine. And that's a very important bit of data that you collected, right, when you did your original Fleet Karma project.
Yeah, exactly. Like every time, sort of, at least with Canadian energy prices, it's about a fifth to a sixth. So every time that you plug in and drive a kilometer a mile on electric versus gas, you're saving about 5/6 of the price. So if you have a Volt, like, plug in whenever you can, because the less kilometers or miles you're racking up on gas, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what you're paying per litre at the moment. We're paying about $1.60 per litre, which is
we're $1.40
right.
In dollars. So
you're paying much more than us then, I think, probably. No,
But
a lot
I
less.
think the other way,
a lot
yeah.
less. Yeah, we're paying a lot more than you. So that'd be interesting. I have to do the conversion. I don't know how much the Canadian dollar is worth at the moment. I know the US dollar and the pound is the pound is quite strong against the US dollar, but I don't know how it's doing against the Canadian dollar. Anyway, moving on. BMW i3. Do you like it?
Uh,
Put you on the
so
spot.
I really like the idea of a really small range extender on it, just for the people that are going to require that for a level of comfort, even though they probably won't use it. My challenge is there's some things about it I love a lot, but there's certain angles when you look at it that it looks like an Aztec.
Yes.
And for me, looking like an Aztec is not a positive thing.
You expect Walter White to get out, and
Yeah, exactly. So that's where like there's some parts about it I love, and sitting in it, like I love that they've said, look, this is an electric vehicle. We're not going to restrict ourselves to sort of conventional vehicle design, and so we're going to change different materials. Like I actually like that there's no B-pillar, but there's just certain angles of that vehicle that just don't do it for me.
Yep, I can understand that. Well, the BMW i3 apparently is a conquest car. This is a story from last week. BMW said, quite a lot of our drivers, I think more than 60%, are coming to the brand just for the i3, which kind of flies in the face of what a lot of people had said. Oh, this is the car for BMW drivers to go electric, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people are conquest conquest customers, just like they were for the Leaf, just like they were for the Volt, just like they were for the Prius. And essentially, the message here is if you want to earn new custom, make a green car that's different to everybody else, and people will come in their droves. The interesting thing, though, is that the i8 plug-in hybrid sports car is not a conquest car for BMW, and it's a car that people buy if they already have, half a dozen cars in their garage. They've got their Maserati, they've got their Porsche 911, they've got maybe a Rolls Royce, and they've maybe got a 7 Series or something for every day, and they want the i8 as well, and they buy the i8 essentially as a trophy car, which is a really interesting take. I know that the i8's worth obviously quite a lot more than the i3, but do you have anything to say on that one, Matt?
So I think the i8 is a beautiful trophy, and I would love it if someday I could afford to have it as a trophy. But it's a beautiful car, and I definitely love it. I was also in the group of folks that thought the i3 was for previous BMW owners, and it wasn't a conquest opportunity. But that was a naive view on my part. So when I saw that article, I thought it was really interesting, and it makes a lot of sense given what's going on with the other OEMs. And I think even in my case with the vehicles my wife's looking at, like the vehicles we're looking at, are brands that we've never owned before, and we're going to it because we want that vehicle that has that powertrain, and so I think it resonates. But yeah, it's a beautiful trophy, but I think the message that if you deliver a powertrain that people really want, it's not a brand decision; it's a vehicle decision.
Right. No, that makes total sense. That makes absolutely total sense. All right, Minnesota has become the first US state. Now, I wouldn't have thought of this, but Minnesota, and I'm not going to do any Fargo impressions. Really want to, not going to.
I was hoping, no?
Problem is, my Minnesotan sounds a little bit like my Canadian.
I'm okay with that.
So, Minnesota, eh?
Hey.
Almost Minnesotan. They talk very slowly. Minnesota is the first US state in the US. Interestingly, there aren't any US states that aren't in the US, but you know what I mean. To mandate that all utility companies offer special rates for electric car drivers. Now, this is not a special, more expensive rate. This is a special, you have an EV, therefore we're going to charge you less to charge your car, which I think is brilliant. What do you think?
I think it's amazing. And again, we do a lot of work with utilities, and especially if you bring them into a smart charging system, having EVs on a grid, if they're managed correctly, is immensely valuable and helpful for the grid. So the idea that they're going to mandate that, knowing that they're good for the grid when controlled correctly, that some of that benefit is going to be shared to the EV owners, also to help them get into more EVs. I think it's that shows a lot of leadership, and I think it's financially sound strategy.
Yeah, And it's also a case of all the utilities will now also have to offer 100% renewable tariff. Now, I don't know what the situation is like for you in Canada, but over here you can get a renewable energy tariff, but you have to pay more for it. I'm on a 100% electricity tariff that's renewable energy. And how it works is your energy company promises that for every kilowatt hour of electricity you consume, and unfortunately, I consume a lot, partly because of the studio, they will either produce or buy in an equivalent amount of electricity from renewable only sources. And I think that's a really good way of encouraging people to make the switch, right?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. In Ontario, we have the option where you can pay more. There's something called Bullfrog Power that you can sign up to have your volt be fully charged by renewables for the tariff. The thing is, in Canada, there's a lot of provinces like Quebec and BC that are over 98% hydro already. So the tariffs kind of, every electron coming out of your wall is fully renewable in a few of our provinces. So it's a nice situation to be in.
It is awesome. It is absolutely awesome. We have not been taken. We've had some gremlins. I just want to let everyone know the audio problem is back, and I don't think it stopped the recording. I'm looking at the meters right here. That's why I keep looking off camera, because my monitor machine is there, and I'm listening to the audio as it's coming out of the machine. The audio on the stream seems fine, but the audio podcast version has just died, and I think I just need to rip my entire studio apart and start again. I'm going to have such a fun weekend. Anyway, let's move to the final story of this segment. California is in the process of changing legislation so that Tesla can build a gigafactory there. Now, California's not exactly said we want to change the legislation so that Tesla can stay in California and build a gigafactory, but the bill is working its way through the houses at the moment, and it's so carefully worded that it can only mean Tesla. Essentially, what the problem is California, because it's had such bad air pollution and environmental pollution in the past, has a really, 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 really tough process that you have to go through if you want to build a factory or a hotel or some other building. And it can take years to obtain the necessary permits, especially for industrial things, to actually get something up and running. Now, Tesla doesn't have that time. We talked about this earlier on in the show. Tesla doesn't move at the usual glacial speed. It moves really quickly. And Tesla needs to get the gigafactory up and running in time to produce those all-important 18650 cells for use in its third generation affordable car, the one we thought would all be called the Model E, but isn't going to be the Model E now. And in order for that to happen, Tesla needs to get that ground broken and build that factory PDQ. Now, Tesla discounted California originally when it was looking for sites because it said, hey, it's just going to take too long to get through the regulatory process. Now California is pushing through this bill as a matter of urgency, several bills, to essentially give incentives and make things really, really easy for the building of a large-scale lithium-ion battery factory. Sounds like Tesla, looks like Tesla. It's Tesla, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, I think that this underscores two things that Tesla's done really well, and links back to our patent discussion. Is Tesla's been phenomenally effective at putting people's shoes on fire in a good way and making people move at a speed that they never thought they could, and that's industry wide within automotive industry, but also the regulatory industry. And I think the second thing it underscores is a very clear statement that clean business is good business, and any jurisdiction wants to have it in their area. So California definitely doesn't want to see that plant go somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's a lot of 6,000 jobs, 1,000 acre factory, massive investment. And California needs that money. It really does. All right, Third part coming up. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the third part. I hope you are all still watching and listening at home. There's nobody in the chat room, which makes me wonder if we've still got problems with the sound, but I can see it going out here, so tweet me or something. I've got my Twitter client open. Let me know if there's any problems. Last week, I was in Barcelona in Spain, and I test drove the ENV200, which is Nissan's all-new electric panel van and passenger van. It was like driving a Nissan Leaf, just a big, tall Nissan Leaf. Matt, have you driven it yet? Have you seen it?
I haven't. That's why I was so excited to hear what you had to say about it, because our fleet clients are very interested in getting their hands on it.
Okay, well, a couple of things. It's the interesting thing is Nissan has re-engineered the NV200, the gasoline version, and this is really clever. Nissan's essentially taken the stock drivetrain and battery pack out of the Leaf, repackaged it slightly, but it's in the van. It's obviously front wheel drive. The front suspension and steering geometry is very much like the Leaf. It's almost unchanged from the Leaf, in fact. But the rear suspension, Nissan has taken out of its US version of the NV200. It was much beefier suspension. It's got lots of weight carrying capabilities. 770 kilos, which probably sounds not very high. It's only, 1,400, 1,500 pounds for our US listeners. But in the UK, and I suspect in parts of Canada, that's a decent payload, right?
Yeah, very much. And what we find with our fleet clients is they're frequently volume limited, not mass limited. So, the mass limitations really are irrelevant. Packages are too big.
Right. And what I really liked about it is the payload. The floor of the ENV200 is really low. I mean, it's the lowest of its class, and getting in and out of it was a breeze. And I assume loading it's going to be pretty easy too. As a side note, I didn't actually drive the panel van because I wanted to focus more on the passenger variant. But I drove the Avalia, which is kind of the upmarket, more family-oriented minivan variant. Interestingly, the Avalia is not coming to the UK. We're only going to get the combi version, which is like the Avalia but less plush. And the Avalia really isn't very plush. I mean, if you looked at that as a car, you'd think it was the base model. So the combi's kind of no frills, but it was all right. It's all right. I'm going to get one on press loan in a couple of weeks, hopefully. So there'll be more of a review then. But initial
what
impressions.
Was the drive quality?
Initial impressions, very good. It drove very much like the Leaf. It felt very much like the Leaf. It was heavier. You could tell that the steering was a little bit heavier. There was a little bit more suspension travel, but it was a very smooth experience. And I forgot that I was driving a van. It was that good. Acceleration is less. I was able to squeal the tyres, though, 2 or 3 times. It's quite torquey. They've changed the gearing, so top speed is limited to just over 76 miles an hour, so that's, 120, 125 kilometres per hour. So it's a slower top speed than the Leaf, and you do notice once you get to about 80 kilometers an hour, you notice. So 50 miles an hour, you notice it's a lot slower. But it's still faster than the diesel or petrol version. So it's a win-win-win. The gear lever is a standard automatic gear shifter, lots of space in the cabin. It's got the same car wing system. If you opt for car wings, it has the same car wings as you'd find in the Leaf. So it's all really, really, really familiar. The passenger van, is very, very versatile. The seats fold flat and fold forward. Lots of really, really easy access at the side. And it just felt really good. It didn't feel like a van. I think that's probably my kind of takeaway feel of it. And I think it was very promising. Be great for florists, great for anybody who's not really driven much in the way of commercial vehicles before, but needs one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds phenomenal. And that low floor thing, one of the first EVs we worked on was a Class 5 electric vehicle. And its entire payback was the fact that it was low floor. So the delivery vehicle could just roll its dolly in and out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a low rider per se, but it was lower than a lot of cars. I mean, if you think of a Sprinter van, Mercedes Sprinter vans are quite high up off the ground, but this was really low because there's no transmission. It's front-wheel drive, there's no transmission, the battery pack's nicely sandwiched. This is the interesting thing, though. The most important thing, and an interesting thing about it, is that its battery pack is cooled. Air-cooled.
I was very happy to see that when you made note of that.
The Nissan has said, look, and the vehicle is going to be sold in a dizzying array of different variants. It will come as standard with 3 kilowatt onboard charger and no rapid charger. If you want the rapid charger, you have to buy it as extra, and you end up buying the 6 kilowatt as extra as well. But Nissan has said, look, most people are only going to use this. They're only going to do 100 kilometers a day, 60 miles a day. This car is going to be well suited to that. NEDC range of, I think, just over, I think it's 125 kilometers. But I think real world is going to be about 100 kilometers, so 60 miles achievable. Maybe 80 kilometers, 50 miles if it's heavily laden and you're really heavy with it. But because of that rapid charge technology, it means that you can refill the battery pack just like you can with a Leaf or a Mitsubishi i-MiEV. Now, the air cooling apparently is to help the battery last if it's in a heavy duty environment, so it's a vehicle that's been driven maybe 24 hours a day, is being constantly discharged and charged up, and we got to see a cutaway of the EMV 200, and it has a tiny radiator right in the front of the battery pack, a fan behind that radiator, and two pipes that come out and join up with the car's or the van's cooling system. Now, Nissan said, this is not like a full thermal managed solution, but it does enable us to make sure that the inside of the battery pack stays a sensible temperature, and we'll keep it cool and keep it hot. Now, Matt, you said it earlier on, battery thermal management is really, really important, especially in cold climates like the north of Canada.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, so the cold climate will, because you got to run a heater and a few other things just for the cabin to keep the driver warm, you're going to reduce range. But the upside of being where I live is that the really hot weather that degrades the battery over its life isn't an issue. But that's where I was really glad to see that you made note, that you found out that there is some enhanced cooling over the Leaf, because again, as you know, we data log a lot of vehicles, and we're data logging a lot of Leafs in quite hot weather, and I've been looking at the data to track the battery degradation, and it'll definitely make me feel more comfortable that there's an enhanced cooling system on those batteries.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, the one thing I didn't find out is whether there's a heat pump in the EMV 200. I don't think there is. I would hope there is as an option, but I didn't see it mentioned, and no one talked about it. But what I can tell you is that driving around, it was 30 degrees Celsius, so 90 something Fahrenheit. It was coping really well with the heat. No sign of overheating battery pack. So that is phenomenal news, because it means that Nissan's done a good job and is keeping that battery pack happy. The question I have, though, is do we think that Nissan's going to adopt this on the Leaf, Matt? We're talking about second generation Leaf, 2016. Let's put our finger in the air and see if we can detect the wind.
My gut read is that they either have to do some notable enhancements to the chemistry, or they need to add this. And my guess is they're going to add this. It definitely slightly increases their build cost, but I think it's well worth it for them in the long run. So that's my guess.
So without sort of breaking any NDAs, you're seeing quite a lot of Leaf batteries in hot and cold climates, aren't you?
Yeah, and all the other EVs as well. So because we have the data across the board, it's useful for us to sort of benchmark what's happening on the different systems that are built differently. And so I would expect that they're either going to add the cooling system or tweak up their chemistry. And my guess is probably the cooling system is a good solution.
I need to introduce you to Tom Saxton of Plug in America, who's a regular on the show, because battery life and battery health is one of his favourite topics of discussion. All right. Something really scary happened this week. Now, you're a biker.
Yeah.
What do you ride?
Honda was the first vehicle I owned of any type. Was a Honda XL250 Niro motorcycle.
Excellent. Well, it's really funny that in England, most people don't start on a 250 unless they're doing complete off-road. And I know, obviously, the Enduro is an off-road bike. My first one was an MZ, ETZ 125. With its two-stroke engine, very, very polluting. But I don't have a bike at the moment. But this week, and I should probably, I've always wanted to ride bikes. My parents never let me. My older sister, who's 15 years older than me, had a moped. And she always wanted to have a motorbike. And she had a couple of mopeds. And I was very jealous as a, 8-9-year-old, as my sister would go off down the road on her moped. But obviously, when I became a motoring journalist, I was like, I need a motorcycle license. I managed to convince various people to let me get one. And every now and then we get bikes to review. So, this one, though, I'm really looking forward to. Harley-Davidson has just unveiled the LiveWire. And I don't know about the name. LiveWires for everybody. Don't hold them and stick them in your mouth at the same time. I don't know why I said that in a very Professor Elemental voice. I just did. I've just heard the new Professor Elemental album. It is fantastic. It also happens to have, one of the videos happens to have a good friend of ours in the video, which is so amazing. Anyway, complete rat run there. Back to the story. Harley-Davidson has unveiled the LiveWire. It looks gorgeous. I'll see if I can get a picture of it. What do you think?
You completely made my day. So first thing when I got in the office, 6 a.m. I opened up Facebook, and I saw your post about that. I had no idea that was coming, and in the office I was talking with one of my colleagues, and I said, the day that Harley comes out with an electric motorcycle is the day we know the industry's moved. And so your post was the very first thing I saw when I got in the office, and it just put a huge smile on my face.
No, it's like a V-Rod, isn't it?
Yep.
It's got that V-Rod look, and it's slightly streety. It's a naked bike. I prefer naked bikes. I can't get the image up. It's misbehaving. I need an intern, essentially. I need a producer or an intern. I do this all myself. And one of these days I'm going to get someone to do all the button pushing for me. It's a lovely motorbike. There are some... You'll notice in the article that we wrote, Harley-Davidson made a press release which had lots of words in, but very little content. Very little about the batteries, very little about the motor, very little about anything else. And then I was kind of looking around for details, and I reached out to Harley-Davidson for clarification because I saw about 5 or 6 different sites, including Wired and The Independent, citing different stats. One of them said it was equivalent to about a 50 kilowatt electric motor or 55 kilowatt electric motor, but it was really, really low torque. Which, that would fit with a decent gearbox, and we know it's going to be a dual-clutched bike. But then range was quoted as, one person quoted 130 miles, another person quoted 50. So I think the jury's out on that. But it's now on tour. It's going on tour this weekend around North America. Around America. You and I have to wait until next year. So Canada and Europe are going to get the bikes next year on tour. It is a concept bike. Harley hasn't said for sure if it's going to make it, but it does point in that direction. And I think we should probably say, fair's fair, Harley-Davidson has tried really hard to make a name for itself as an environmentally responsible company, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where... in one way I was really surprised, but in the other way it fits with where Harley's been going.
And I think it's good to see.
Absolutely. And for me, I kind of take the look of it as a little bit like a Ducati Monster 696 meets a Zero motorcycle. And so I love the look of it, and I hope they bring it through to production, but I think regardless of what happens on the production intent, it's a big statement for our industry.
Yes, I think you're right. And the noise that it makes is just phenomenal.
Well, motorcycles are all about noise, right? You gotta make sure people are hearing you in the way that they want to hear you.
And this is the front of the bike. I'm going to see if I can get this to work now. I'm going to do this manually. That's the front of the bike there. Isn't that gorgeous? That is and I love the way that the indicators are built into the mirrors in a very straight. It's almost like a Cylon.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very cool. And the headlights are LED, of course, as well. Really nice stance. It's fairly straight handlebars. That caught me off guard. Did it catch you?
I kind of like that look. For me, it's a little bit more of a brute, naked standard kind of look. And if you were asking me before, like what would be the angle of the handlebars, I definitely wouldn't have picked that. But when I saw it, the design aesthetic seems to work.
Yeah, it makes total sense. But it kind of went, oh, that's a bit straight for Harley. You're used to them being a bit, bit more cruisy. But Harley's kind of really branched out, and I think people kind of do Harley-Davidson a disservice by thinking of it as just a hog brand and a cruiser brand. It makes a lot more than that. But 30 dealers over the next 12 months in the US, and then next year into Canada and to the UK and the rest of Europe. So yay! All right.
I'm super excited.
Super excited, and I want to ride one. I do want to ride one, and I want to see how far I can go on it. At sensible speeds, it must be said. Coffee. Do you like coffee, Matt?
I have way too much coffee. So I love it.
All right. So coffee is obviously grown in large quantities. 2.25 billion cups consumed a day of coffee. I'm not sure if they're talking Starbucks venti or if they're just talking little tiny cups. I would probably guess the former rather than the latter. But researchers at the University of Bath, which is about 30 miles from me, have come up with a way of turning coffee grounds into biodiesel. Now, on the front of this is kind of like that's a clever idea. Coffee grounds contain a lot of oil because obviously the beans have a lot of oil in as well. The husks have a lot of oil during the process of roasting them, and some of the oils are released. That's part of where the flavour comes from. But the whole coffee bean process is really wasteful. We grow the coffee beans, we ship them around the world, we dry them, we roast them, we throw a lot of the bean away when we're roasting them. We then, and a lot of beans are wasted during that process because they don't come out right. We then grind them or do whatever we're going to do with them, and we end up with a lot of coffee grounds afterwards. We just throw away. A lot of people put them on the gardens, or some people even use it as makeup, which is a bit bizarre. I've seen them used for dyeing clothes. But these guys say that about 20% of the oil, you can get 20% of the oil out, and you can turn that into biofuel. But the yield is not very good, and this is kind of the stickler here. I like the idea of driving down the road in a coffee-smelling car, but to make 2 litres of fuel, you need 10 kilos of coffee grounds. Now, the maths doesn't come out very well in favour of this particular fuel technology, does it, Matt?
No. Like, we go through a lot of coffee here, but that'd be a lot of time for us to make enough to go 100 kilometers.
Right, so 10 kilos, for those of you who are interested, is what your average small coffee shop in the UK will produce every day in coffee grounds and waste. That's great if that waste is going to be used and turned into 2 litres of liquid biofuel. But most diesel cars will do, at best, 40 miles on that. 40 miles, 70 kilometers on 2 litres of diesel. And that would be if you were like in a smart car diesel or something like that. Big cars, it would be a lot worse, wouldn't it, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we data log a lot of vehicles, and sort of average real world fuel efficiency of a diesel, we see around 7 liters per 100K. So it would line up with what you said.
7 litres. So you get to work in the morning. That'll be it.
Yep. And then you got to drink a lot of coffee.
A lot of coffee. You could probably run home.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea, and every little bit helps. But yeah, I think you hit on the crux of it making a massive impact.
Oh dear. All right. Well, we are going to finish by talking about the ambassador of EV Land, and I'm just going to turn around for this one because I need to press the play button. Persuading people to drive electric vehicles. There have been lots of different adverts over the years, haven't there? And some have been pretty good, and some of them are pretty rubbish, and some of them are just really, really funny. So this one is produced by the Californian Center for Sustainable Energy. I'm having to do this manually. This is the advert, and it's really interesting because this is a guy called Stan, obviously he's played by an actor, who's just bought an EV, and as someone noticed, it was a Fiat 500e rather than a Leaf or anything like that. And he's extolling the virtues of driving an electric car.
To shellfish. Not only is my electric car fun, it's carefree too. There's no messy oil changes, no transmission to wear out, no radiator to blow, which means fewer trips to the mechanic. So now Carl and I can spend a little less time working on my car, and a little more time working on our friendship.
So there you have it. It's a very silly advert, and I like it. What do you think of it, Matt? Have you seen it?
So I haven't had a chance to see it. I was listening in, and I was going to pull it up here, but it sounds like it speaks to the virtues of an EV outside of just the efficiency side. So.
It does. And a lot of people were very upset that it was a compliance car rather than a mass market car. But hey, it makes people think. And this is about the idea behind this was to promote a series of workshops being held in the San Francisco Bay Area this summer, where you can go and meet EV drivers and find out about EVs and find out about how much it costs, etc., etc., etc. The reason why we're giving it some social love now is the Centre for Sustainable Energy put the Better Ride project out online a month ago, and it hasn't had much social love. I think they've had. I'm just seeing how many visits they've had, how many hits they've had. It's still under 1,000, so we're going to give it some love. So spread the love, tell everybody about it. Thank you very much for joining me today, Matt. I hope we've not taken out too much of your day.
Absolute pleasure.
Remind people where they can go to find out about your My EV project.
So just go to Indiegogo/mykarma/electric/vehicle. Okay. Sorry, dash.
And I'm gonna show it to you now so that everyone can see it. There you go. That's the website there. And as of right now, I don't know if we have had anything to do with it, but you are now at 43% of your funding, and you've got 18 days left. How many days have you been running, Matt?
Oh, I should know this off by heart. I think about 25 days, and we can actually extend it by a few more days.
So you've got some early birds that are sold out.
Yeah.
You've got some early bird extended, which is new. That wasn't on there earlier on.
Because they went out and people have said, well, we really wanted to get in the early bird, so we made a small extra category.
Canadian niceness again. There you go.
A little bit, yeah.
Thanks ever so much for joining us, and come back. And it's been great fun. Stick around. We're just going to have the credits, and we'll have a chat after the show. Until next week, though, folks, thanks for joining us, and don't forget to plug in. See you soon. Take care. Bye.